Thank you for doing this. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, no problem. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
How are things in Arizona?
Good. It's
Good,
really nice out right now.
I'm sure.
I wish it was like this all year. Okay. It'll tell us when someone's on, and if no one's on right away, we can just start.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Well, welcome everyone to my live interview with Jesse Monza. He was a former student of ours in the Toxic Mold Trained program. And I just thought it would be interesting for y'all to hear his story and, his experience with mold and the steps he's taking to get into this field and why he would do this crazy thing. Let me read a little bit more about Jesse for you. So Jesse Monza is a certified mold assessor through Normie and founder of No Spores LLC. He is passionate about helping people understand how to navigate the often complicated process of mold discovery and remediation. His company exists to serve highly sensitized individuals looking for help in determining how to approach mold in their indoor environment. No Spores offers consulting, virtual inspections, and local inspections on a select basis. That's a great summary.
Thank you.
I know last we talked, you're like, trying to put it all together. So maybe this interview helped push you in that direction.
It did. Thank you so much.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you a dangerous question because it's so hard to be succinct in a mold story. But I wondered if you could just start us with kind of the basics of where you were living and how you first started to get sick or think you might have mold, kind of the early stages of all that.
Sure. So for years, my wife and I moved around quite a bit, and every time we lived in a house, we would have water issues, moisture damage or water damage, but we didn't think much about it. We would just say, there's a leak, we'd fix it, but we'd kind of move on. We wouldn't take it as seriously as we could have or should have. So we'd move around, and around 2016, I started having strange things happening. My brain was getting inflamed, I would call it, with anxiety. I was having OCD. I was having weird psychological issues starting to happen. And we just moved into a house, and that started to kick off. And so I went from counselor to counselor, from psychologist to functional medicine doctor, even went to the Amen clinic down in Atlanta to have a brain scan done. And they said, your brain's on fire. And so I didn't have hope, Bridget. I had no hope whatsoever with what I was dealing with.
Wow.
Because I was, struggling to find help. So fast forward a little bit, in 2021, we moved again to a newer house. It was about a year old, maybe 2 years old. And we thought, well, a new house shouldn't have any issues, right? And turned out that wasn't the case. So shortly after moving in, we had a water event where there was water damage from a shower that leaked. And I'm really so thankful that we had that damage, because a friend of ours said, hey, you should have your house checked for mold. And it was a minor leak, but they recommended having it checked. And we thought, okay, we'll have it checked. And someone came out, they did an ERMI sample, they did some air samples, did a full home inspection, and come to find out our HERTSME and ERMI scores were off the chart. And basically what she presented to us was, you really should consider moving out. This is a pretty new house. You wouldn't expect there to be issues. But at the time that happened, I was working with some functional doctors, and they said, tell us more about this mold at your house, because we're interested in knowing about it. So I sent the results to them. Long story short, they did a mold mycotox urine analysis on me, and they found the mycotoxin for Stachybotrys and Chitomium in my system. And so that was D-Day. I mean, it was awful to get that news, but it was also one of the best things that happened to me, because it gave me a chance to have an answer to what was going on. So, fast forward a little bit more, we ended up having multiple remediations at our house. and you know how that can go. So we had contractors come out that were supposed to do a whole home cleaning with a fine particle clean at the end. And we have cameras at our house, which are
Yeah.
for security.
I know where this is going.
Yeah, so we watched on the camera as they would, kind of half wipe the wall here and kind of half wipe it there and vacuum, and they got a blower out at some point blowing stuff off the walls. And we had powder on the walls, so we thought it was from the drywall, when they finished the drywall, but it probably was mold on the walls. Again, it's a new house, we wouldn't expect this. So we had the fine particle clean half done, and we were so frustrated. You spend a ton of money on this work to get it done, and the contractors didn't care. We also had multiple inspectors come in to give us their opinion, and not everybody cares about mold the way that you think you would hope that they do. Some of them were like, "Yeah, you're probably fine. It's not a big deal." And again, it was super frustrating. You know how this can go. So again, long story short, we decided, let's give it one more chance, and we did our own remediation. So we turned off the air, we did our duct cleaning, and then we went room by room with air scrubbers running and cleaned every single surface, did a fine particle clean according to the IICRC standards, which is the standard setters for mold remediation. So we kind of followed their protocol, did it ourselves, and I almost gave up on the house because it still didn't feel good for me and my wife when we finished the job. But my doctor had recommended that we put a device in place that would clean the air. And so we tried that, and I think that was just the cherry on top. It pushed us over the edge where we could feel safe in our house again and feel well. So we ended up being okay. So we're still in the home. That's why, and I know I'm jumping around here, but this is why I'm in the industry. I was so frustrated, Bridget, with the amount of people that didn't care, that were there just to make a quick buck. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but there was a lot of people that came out just to give us their opinion, but they didn't seem to care about the health impact of mold and what it was doing to our family.
Yeah, it can be a hard thing to define, and there's just can be quite a gap between like the health side and the building side,
Right.
where we're not understanding each other really.
Mm-hmm.
A couple follow-up questions. So I think if people, especially if they came on late, they might say, "Oh, well, all he did was to remediate was clean," but you did have these contractors actually remove
That's right.
drywall or whatever.
That's right. In our bathroom, we had to do a full demolition. So we demoed the bathroom and rebuilt it. But our challenge in our home was in the dust. We had dust in our home that was pre-existing our move-in. I think it was there when we moved in, and the whole house needed to be cleaned. But yes, we did a full demolition in our bathroom, rebuilt the whole bathroom, cleaned out. There's a basement, so cleaned out the area in the basement below us, and did a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and professionals did that. And I don't recommend doing it yourself in every situation. Obviously, the professionals know best. But for our situation, nobody cared about our home as much as we did.
Yeah, the follow-up, it sounds like, was like the part that wasn't enough for you, so to speak. So yeah, and I think that is a really detailed process. It's really painstaking.
It is.
So as you know, because you went from room to room with an air scrubber and cleaning materials. So so when you went to the Amen clinic and they told you your brain was on fire, did they suggest mold at that point?
No, they didn't even ask about mold. They didn't ask about water damage. They took a psychological approach to it, and they asked a whole bunch of psychological questions and gave me a prescription and said, "Hey, this will help you." And so I got some answers of, yeah, your brain's on fire, but they didn't know the source of it.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised to hear that. I don't know if it was like the particular instance there, because I definitely know like people have gone to an Amen clinic and been told like this looks like a concussion, this looks like mold, this looks like drug exposure. So just interesting. Yeah, and I know for probably you at that stage and many clients and myself, like when you're spending money and like kind of only getting like a half an answer, it's hard. Yeah. Just like the home side can be frustrating. You're spending money and not getting a complete picture. The health side can kind of be the same. And I think there isn't, unfortunately, one like magic wand on either side, right? There isn't probably one practitioner who's going to catch everything about your case and have every right remedy. And there isn't probably one on the home side. Although, I know some people in this space doing very advanced, like high touch work, but there aren't that many of those people out there, and not many people can afford that kind of super high touch remediation. So it can be frustrating just like putting all the pieces together when you're not feeling well and your bank account is suffering.
And there's no guarantee either. There's no guarantee. Even if you do all the work perfectly, there could be hidden mold in the walls or in the attic. And
there's so multiple sources usually for mold. So I didn't put this as much in the preview because I didn't want to like overshare, but I think you were dealing with some really intense, neurological, kind of psychological, although really they had a very physical origin, symptoms, which must have been like so scary. And I don't think, again, that people always associate OCD or psychotic episodes, anxiety with mold, that there could be a physical trigger. So do you want to shed a little light on that subject?
Sure. So I'll just redirect me if I'm going off path here, but my struggle was really anxiety and then shutdown. I was having the shutdown, almost like traumatic, where my whole body would go into freeze mode. And I'd lose my brain in a way where I couldn't think, I couldn't process. And generally speaking, I'm a high functioning person. I'm a CPA in my day job, so I'm highly functioning and with it and a lot of my duties at work. But I was having to take a nap in the middle of the day. I was so tired, and that wasn't normal. And I thought, I'm just getting old. I'm just stressed out. I made up all my excuses as to why this is happening because I didn't have the answer. Nobody had the answer for me until we figured out that it was the mold.
Yeah. And when I look back at my own story too, I wonder how much of like mood stuff was mold related. I mean, I definitely part of it, but it's tough too with something like anxiety because people tell you like, oh, like just, work on meditation and, relaxing, which I do think those are valuable tools. But like, let's imagine that same person is living in a very moldy home and they just don't know it. You can meditate all day. I don't think you're going to be, none of us really can meditate all day. We have to go work and raise kids. And so I think it's just when I looked back and learned about the brain more and how it's affected, I really felt almost a lot of like grace for my younger self that I just beat myself up for not being able to handle life and stress better. But I don't think I could have. Even just I think about the way I would startle so easily, right? Like that wasn't a a stress handling thing per se. It was just like my nervous system was so on alert from everything that was going on in my body. So yeah, I have a lot of heart for people who are going through like mental health stuff and not knowing it's mold, because I think you can really beat yourself up about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just accepted, okay, this is just the rest of my life. But it didn't have to be, once we got the answers, there were solutions to healing.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I was getting, one reason I wanted you to come on is, there's still a little bit of disbelief, right, in this, that the mold is real. And so it's nice to bring someone on who, was just sort of having a regular life and like married and working as a CPA. You weren't looking for problems, like, but the problems find you. Like mold doesn't discriminate. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, just go to certain people who believe in alternative medicine. It goes to like anybody. So, you kind of had to become a believer, so to speak, and move over to this side of things to get better, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, so you had all the experience with your health, with your house. I know you shared in the course some like little remedies that you particularly liked. You mentioned your air filter you like. I'm sure people would be loving to hear like some of your favorites if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I'll start with the big. I mean, these are big. Some of these are big ticket items. The big ticket item that really we needed to do at our house was to add a dehumidifier into our HVAC system, and that's
Mm,
very expensive. But with a basement, with humidity, in a basement that can rise above 60%, we needed to put that in place to really address the air inside to maintain an accurate and consistent humidity level. So that really was necessary for us to start with. I don't think we would have had a chance if we didn't have that. And of course, they make dehumidifiers that can go in rooms and smaller spaces. But we decided to get my family decided to get a whole home dehumidifier to give us the best chance possible. Um, one, there's a lot of tools out there, Bridget, and I've got a lot of them on my website, nospores.com. But one thing that we think saved our house was a Valera unit, and it's controversial because there's an ozone version, but the Valera unit is a unit that does photosynthesis, is what I believe what they call it. But anyway, it shoots particles into the air and it neutralizes mold spores, dust, viruses, anything that's floating around. And there's different technologies that do the same thing. But that device, we believe, my wife and I, really saved our home because we put it up, it's a little box, we put it up right next to our return on our HVAC system and let that just crank through our return vent all the way through our HVAC and then into our whole house. That device was really a lifesaver for our home. We've got two in here and we take one with us anytime we travel out of town to hotels or to our in-laws or my in-laws, my parents' house. We take that device with us just to give us peace of mind that something's cleaning the air around us.
Do you mind putting the name in the comments? I put your website in the comments too, but I know we're going to get that question just to how to spell it.
Yeah, and
And
I
I
say,
think it's, go
and I say,
ahead.
do your research.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy over ozone, which you know that. So do your research, make sure it's something you're comfortable with, or get the non-ozone version if you're interested in that. But there's lots of devices out there. It doesn't have to be Valera, but there's devices that can help you clean the air, and that was an absolute necessity for us. So I'll put that.
And I want to point out too, this is something he did as a last step, not the only step. So I think that's where a bit of the controversy comes into on sometimes when I post is like, people are like, I just used a device and that's all I needed. And it's like, that's not, and you can speak to this more because you've been studying out and stuff and remediation. I'm like, I've never seen from anyone I've interviewed that's been in this field 30 years that you just use a device as your only way to treat.
That's
Again,
right.
it's not a maintenance step.
Yeah, it's a maintenance step. It's the at the end of the process. You could, if you have mold in your home, you could put it in there, but you need to find the source first. You need to find the source of your issue, remediate that issue, take it out as much as you can, and then this helps you maintain.
Yeah, yeah. This doesn't come, where comment doesn't come up in my thing. Oh, wait, maybe it comes up in here we go, private chat.
Oh.
I'll put it in the other one because I don't know how this all works.
Thank you.
Okay, whoops. BOLLARA.
That's right.
Okay. So I'd love to talk more about your calling to learn more about this. You said, was it called Nomi? What's your name? Normie? The name
Yeah.
of the company? Okay. So I know we taught this in our course, like there's different certifications you can get or that you can look for when you're hiring. Mm-hmm. So you're a certified mold assessor through Normie. Can you explain like what that means and what your training is?
Sure. The reason I chose to go with Normie, and there's lots of organizations out there. IICRC is a great one. If you need a mold inspector, that's a great place to start, is looking for someone that's IICRC certified. But Normie, in my opinion, takes it a step above. They're the they're the group that helps set the standards in the states that require certified mold inspectors to do work. So Florida is a great example. Florida, New York, there's a couple other states that require you to be certified to do inspections. So I chose Normie because they're on the front line of helping set those standards, and their standards are very conservative. And I don't know that remediators necessarily love their standards, but some things that set them apart is they have what's called zero tolerance molds. So if you have mold in your house like Stachybotrys or Chitomium or Trichoderma, Fusarium, and there's one other I'm not mentioning right now, they say those are zero tolerance molds. So if you have a remediation done and they find those molds at the end of the remediation in your indoor air or on a swab surface sample, they'll fail the remediation and require the remediators to do more work. They also will fail the remediators if the amount of Aspergillus penicillium, which is huge in North Carolina where I live, if it's if it's more than 200 counts per meter cubed, they'll fail you because they say that there's more work required. And I love that, Bridget, because when we were dealing with our home and other places where we had mold impacting our family, a lot of the remediators would say, well, if it's less than 2,000, it's fine. They weren't looking at the species of the mold to determine the source. If I have Stachybotrys, that's a long-term water damaged mold. That means that there's a big issue in the home somewhere. So if that's still showing on an air sample, that could indicate that there's a problem. So they're very conservative. That's why I went with them. I don't love how we were. And again, I'm not trying to bash people in the industry. There's a lot of good people out there that just may not be educated. But we were frustrated as a family. I was frustrated when people were saying, you're fine, but we weren't fine. We didn't feel fine. And there were still things showing up on samples.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. And that's a great point. Like different molds grow at different rates. So some people are like, well, which mold is more dangerous? So like all the toxic molds are dangerous. But like, I think the Aspergillus penicillium are like quick ones, right? They come in, they can grow really quick if there's sitting water. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, and that's just interesting stuff to know, but you as a homeowner won't know that, but it's great if you have an inspector who does understand all that and can explain it. I would say our inspector in Oregon didn't know like the ins and outs of mold and didn't know a lot about like the health part. I don't know where he was trained, but I would say that guy was thorough. He was really looking for like the root causes. He identified a lot of areas that water had intruded or maybe intruding. He took different types of samples. So, I refer to him all the time. He's got tons of great references. So here's one organization, Normie, that you can look to see if they're trained by. What was the other one you mentioned, Jesse?
So Normie is the one I mentioned.
Isn't there some of them with an I?
IICRC. So
IICRC.
They're this is the hard part about the mold industry. There's no standards that people have to be held to, but the IICRC is developing standards that are general rules of thumb when you have remediation. So they have standards for mold inspectors and remediators. They also have standards for water damage and how to handle the dehumidification process, the demo process. So they're setting standards that voluntarily you can hold yourself to, but there are no specific standards in a lot of states. Apart from Florida, New York, there's a couple other ones.
Okay, it's good to hear that Florida has that, considering how wet it is down there.
They need it down there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if I know some people are watching live, so if you have questions for Jesse, feel free to put them just in the comments, and I'll ask here. I'll just share a story I had. I don't know if you've heard this, Jesse, but after inspection, sort of our most obvious place to start was some water damage in our basement. And so we got a few quotes, and we went this guy who had a great guy, reasonable quote. He ran an air scrubber, put up some plastic. And this is just funny looking back, but he was like, we'll take everything out of the basement and put it on the main floor. Now, is this a good idea for her health? No.
Yeah.
Well, we were so clueless too. We just did it. So now we had stacks of stuff that had been in a moldy basement in our main living space. And he did some HEPA vacuuming down there, but he didn't clean all the walls. And he took me down there to like take a look when he was done. And my throat seized up just walking down the stairs. And he's like, really? Because I did everything down here. And he was really 100% trying to do his best and did it according to his training. But I was like, oh, I do not feel good down here. And this whole incident was sort of the beginning of a big downslide for my health. Because now I was exposed to so much more. And yeah, I mean, this is a big part why you and I do this kind of work is, to know some of the mistakes I made that made me sicker. And that's really when my brain started to go even more downhill, like losing things all the time. And it was scary. So, this is why Jesse and I are out here talking about this stuff. Another reason I had you on, Jesse, is like when we met during our training, I was just very impressed that like you seem to be creating a business like very smoothly. You don't have a lot of blocks coming up, which can happen with entrepreneurship. So I wonder if you could tell us more like sort of like what called you to do this, and why you're creating, like you became an assessor, like why you're called or like to this particular thing. I'm asking you like 3 questions in one. And then like, how do you decide what to offer? Because one thing I've been stressing as we enroll in the new course is like, there's a lot of space to do different aspects in this industry. And I think you've been called to a certain part of it, which is super exciting. So just would love to hear more about like how that all came to be.
Sure. I would say I got pigeonholed into this, Bridget, because I learned so much in my own personal journey that I cannot help but help people. That's really my heart behind it. Is I want to help people. It's not about making millions of dollars. It's all about how can I help people, because people help me along the way. People like you and others that taught me things that I could then take and learn from. And if I would not have been educated by somebody else, I probably would have died, honestly, Bridget. I probably would have died or committed suicide. It was so bad that I would have given up. So I can't help but give back to help other people, because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know how sick I was until I realized what health was like. And that thought goes through my mind a lot when I'm thinking about it, where I didn't know how bad I was doing. I knew I was bad, but I didn't know how bad I was until I felt good. And
it's like your brain can't even assess correctly because it's so messed up. So it's like, oh yeah, this is normal. Like maybe I'm getting older. You're probably only like 32, and you're like, yeah, maybe I need to sleep 16 hours a day. Maybe this is normal.
Yeah. So that's why I'm getting into it. It's really, I want to help people out. And, and I've put some things out on my website. I can do consulting and coaching, or virtual inspections or local inspections, with the desire to help people, especially those that are feeling bad and trying to figure out and get answers for themselves or their family.
Yeah, I love it. So for the home part, you're saying like people just started asking you questions because you had learned a lot about the home, more or less.
That's right. Yeah, learned a lot about the home and my health. How does mold impact my health, and how to heal from a lot of these issues.
Did I get your web name correct here?
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's such a cute name. We got to keep it a little fun.
Yeah, it's a play on words. You want to know the spore counts in your house when you want to have
good.
You want to have no spores.
True. It could be NO spores at the same time. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I got. There's so many niches, so you can do local. I think I shared with you. I think her name's PJ Harlow. Is that right?
Yeah,
Who
PJ
does
Harlow.
Virtual, like I think she's just virtual, but just can do some virtual assessment of like your test results. And I just bring her up because I think what you're doing is a little bit like her. I think she became a health coach first, thinking I want to do the health side of this, but then kind of saw this need in the home thing, when she started to offer more home consultations, she told me like it just blew up. Like she was booked out for 3 months because there was nobody really out there, reading your ERMI results and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just a really great niche if that's, what you're called to do. And certainly, I think the home piece is complicated. The health piece is complicated too, and not everyone may want to deal with it, like all the labs and all the stuff. And so that's okay. There could be other areas or ways that you support people according to like your own personality and your own needs. So I think you said your wife might get into the health side, or she's already been sort of more of that person in your home. Is she still thinking about that, or
Yeah,
how's that going?
she is, and I won't share too much about what she's thinking about doing, but she is thinking about pursuing her FDN, which I know you have that. So she'd like to pair that with some other training that she's going to do, and maybe when she gets launched, Bridget, probably later next year, we can touch base and I can fill you in on what she's going to be doing. But she's got a really creative idea of how to help people on the health side and on the emotional side, which I don't think exists right now. So I'll just leave a little surprise out there.
The cliffhanger to be continued. No, I like that. Yeah, keep it close. Well, and I think there's a lot of space on the emotional side. Luckily, we're talking more about like the nervous system and, but I think beyond just like retraining the nervous system, there can just be, emotional support and like active listening. And, I haven't done the nervous system retraining programs myself, but I definitely did a lot of nervous system retraining and just, using other tools to like calm my nervous system. I've worked with a lot of different coaches and gone to different, events and modalities. I did have like a therapist early on early-ish on in mold. I wish I had started sooner, frankly, but I'm more, I feel like I work better with like the coach type work. So I have mostly done that, but I think it's huge. And there often needs to be a level of like emotional healing, trauma healing to have gone through this. It's a lot.
Oh, absolutely. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. And people lose friends, they lose marriages, they lose jobs over this. So it's a lot of grief to process, a lot of trauma to process. So,
absolutely.
Okay, we got a couple questions here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know her name, but she said she did an ERMI test and an Aspergillus niger was high, thousands times the normal limit, and had a mold inspector come in and did an air test, and it didn't show up. Can you address that difference between so everybody, an ERMI test is collecting dust versus an air test collecting air.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take it from there, Jesse?
Sure. I would say this. First of all, Change the Air Foundation, which I know, Bridget, you've heard of them, but they have a lot of great resources. So if they're free, everything's free out there. They're a nonprofit, but Change the Air Foundation has a great, I'll have to find the link, Bridget, but has a great packet of explaining the different mold tests that are available. So I just want to throw that out to the audience out there. It's a great resource, changetheairfoundation.org. But an ERMI test represents the dust in your home. Now that could be historical dust or it could be current dust. And I don't know the age of your house, but it depends on how frequently you clean, where you're going during the day, if you're bringing in dust from outside or from other places like your work or your school, if you have kids, that dust will accumulate. And if it's showing up in your dust, it's more likely than not in your home somewhere. And so first recommendation would be make sure that you have great cleaning procedures. We clean our house twice a month at a minimum and make sure that it's virtually dust free to the extent possible. So we put HEPA air filters in place that, like Air Doctor has some great ones, or other companies. Bridget, you probably have some recommendations, but there's things you can put in to help capture dust, because mold likes to eat dust, and when it has moisture combined with the dust, it can then reproduce and grow. So reducing the dust in your home is very important.
It's going to be growing, multiplying right on that dust as a source.
That's right. It's a food source.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I'll also say an air sample is imperfect because it's a snapshot in time. So if I take an air sample right here in this moment, as I'm breathing and pushing the air away from me, it may show nothing. But if I take the same sample tomorrow after the AC's been running and the house has had time to breathe, or I've had the windows open, that sample may be completely different. It's just a snapshot in time. And mold spores are not always airborne. If they're big enough, they'll drop to the ground. So if it's showing up in your dust and it was taken from the corner of your house, or wherever they took it from, that just shows that it's fallen to the ground and in a format that can be accumulated on a Swiffer or a vacuum. So the air sample, I always say proceed with caution. That's part of the story, but it's not the whole story. You want to take various types of samples to get a good picture of what's going on in your environment.
Yeah, for sure. So we did a webinar earlier today, and the home really requires a lot of different bits of information between like moisture meters, humidity levels, like inspections of paint, bubbling, and there's just so much. So you've really got to combine them all. So yeah, a clean air test doesn't mean no mold, and a dust test doesn't tell you when and where something happened. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough on its own either. Nora had a similar question. She said, do you believe agar plates are a valid way for testing mold? We tested our son's apartment and the agar plates show an elevation of mold, but the air test did not.
And I'd say it's the same answer. I'll give you a story of when we've used agar plates that were helpful. We tested our couches. So when we had issues at our home, we took everything out, right? We took all the soft, porous things out, couches, beds, mattresses, you name it. Anything porous, we pulled it out when we did our clean, and we put it back in, and we were unsure if it was safe. The theory of if you sit on it, it's going to poof anything off of it, the dust and everything will fly into the air. So we did an agar plate test where we just kind of tapped it on the couch. And of course it showed mold. We did one in our car. Immunolytics has a great test kit that you can order online, do it yourself. But here's my story where I think this proves that they work. We recently got a puppy, and we debated getting a dog because we know that can cause allergy issues with our family. But we got a puppy, and we were all reacting to it. Like, it was making my daughter's throat close up. And that's a hypoallergenic poodle mix, and it's a Cavapoo. So it's a cute little hyperallergenic friendly dog, but we were all reacting to it. And so we talked to the vet, and she recommended doing some things. Detoxing them is what came to our mind first, Bridget. You'd probably laugh. We put it on charcoal to
detox the dog.
Detox the dog. But we tested it with the agar plate, and it came up with a mold that's a water damaged mold from inside. I don't remember the name of it, but it's it's attracted to cellulose wallboard. It's not an outdoor mold. And so right out of the gate, we knew this dog's been in a moldy environment. And so then we did all the things to heal it from the inside out, just like you do a human. And guess what? We're not allergic to it anymore.
Oh my gosh.
So there's, they work. Again, it's part of the picture. It's part of the story. I wouldn't rely on it completely, but I'd say, what else is the data showing me? First question I would ask is that person well in their apartment or their home? How are they feeling? Do they have symptoms? Once you know your symptoms and can correlate it to mold, then it's easy to know that there might be an issue here that I'm dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. So Nora, I think you could do a dust test as well. I like the brand, the dust test, because you can add the mycotoxin component and then get a better sense of like not just like the mold load, but like the mycotoxin load. So that could be an option for the apartment. Yeah, if your son's having issues and you're suspecting something, I would say keep following up with that. And no, it also could be another source too. I think the home is the most common because we spend the most time there, so we become the most exposed. But I've had people be exposed in their workplace as well. So and sometimes it's like a past exposure, maybe not for just your son's case, but I'm just kind of sharing that when I first started in this, I really couldn't believe that like old exposures could still be affecting people until I started to see it on their test results. And I was like, whoa. So yeah, just something to think about.
The other thing I'll say about an air sample is that if you do an air sample, it's a little disc, kind of like a puck, and it's capturing air. Usually they run it for 5 minutes, could be less than that, but we'll run an air sample for 5 minutes. And what it's doing is it's capturing anything that goes into that little puck or canister onto a spore trap, is what they call it. And it's basically a slide that you can put under a microscope. So think about it. So you've got air coming in into this little tiny hole from this little pump that's sucking in air at some flow rate that's not very strong, kind of like sucking through a straw. And it's captured on this little tiny disc that then is used under a microscope, where the lab technicians then try to manually read what's on that disc. So, so it's it's a good picture, but you're at the mercy of, what's the air in the house right now looking like? Where did they put the sample device? Where did they test it? How much movement was in that home before they did it? Because you want to have an environment that's normal to your living condition. And if nobody was in there and you didn't have the air running or something like that, then that's not your normal living condition. So you're at the mercy of that, and you're at the mercy of the lab technician to find the spore and identify it, and have a duty of care, which they should, to then write it on the report. So again, it's an imperfect science. It's just a tool, I'll call it, that helps you know if there's issues. For me, if it's showing up on the ag plate and it's growing some species that you should be concerned about, then I would do further investigation. I would look into that. If you're leaving the ag plate out for 30 minutes and it's capturing whatever it captures, there's probably an indication that there's something going on in the environment. There's always going to be mold. It really depends on the type of mold in that environment. That's where we really should care the most, because you're always going to have mold in your house. It exists outside. It comes inside. But what species is there? That's where I focus my attention.
Yeah, same. Like, I think there's something to be said by the overall load, but as a practitioner, I mostly focus on like the toxic species. And I think Jesse and I like immunolytics because they offer the plates, but like in a little more sophisticated way. You can get a phone call with them and they'll suggest like where to put plates, like strategically. Like, some people ask me, what about the plates like at Home Depot? I just don't know, like those ones. Do they help you analyze it? Do they just have you read it yourself? I don't really know. So I prefer a company that has a little more structure around them. Linda asked if she has high candida on agar plates. What does this mean?
And this is where I'd say I'm not a lab technician, so I would read the report. I'd want to see what the report says about that. Candida is a form of yeast, right?
Yeah, and with water damage in the home, then you can get high yeast, and also from an individual. I've heard, like, if an individual in the family has candida, then it can be like in the home, and other people can pick up on it. I know Immunolytics has done some interesting stuff around like what they find near, say, a diaper pail versus like a kitchen sink or whatever. You might get different types of like yeast or bacteria or mold depending on the source. So yeah, Linda, and like we kind of explained, yeah, you don't know past or current exposure, really. You can just test where you're at now. You probably can't test where you lived 20 years ago. But the treatment is similar. Like, obviously you have to test your home very thoroughly, as we were explaining. But if you actually really think it's clear, but you can maybe think of like a time you had a basement apartment or a time you weren't feeling good and getting sick all the time, like you may think of something in your past. In that case, the treatment is similar, right? Treating colonization in the body. You can test for some colonization in the body, like a Marcon's test for the nose. Sometimes you can find colonization in the gut through an organic acids test. I don't think there is perfect. Those are some ways, Linda, you could see if you have colonization in the nose or the gut, and then just move forward with treatment that way. So. Getting into some big questions. So I feel, some of these questions get complicated, and some of the levels on a urine test may say not present. One thing to keep in mind, well, it could just be that you're low, or it could be that you're not pushing mycotoxins out because your body is overwhelmed. So there can be like false negatives potentially on a mycotoxin test. We like people to take a sauna the day before to kind of help push stuff out. So there's just some things that, unfortunately no test is perfect. I find the urine test usually pretty good. I've only seen one false negative my whole time. But it can happen if you're not pushing enough mycotoxins out. Your body isn't like able to. But Nora's asking the way to test a home prior to purchase, and we'll let this be the last question.
Sure, and I'd mentioned glutathione would also help to detox, and we just keep on that routine. The best way, so if I was going to buy a house today, and there's a lot of new technologies out there as well that you could consider, but if I was going to test a house today, I would find a normally certified individual to come in and test it. You could do it yourself, right? You can buy some of these things on Amazon, but I'd have them come out and I would look for signs of water damage. That'd be my first place I would look. I would look under the sinks. I would look under the windowsills. I would look as much as I could at the ceiling and the roof line, just to make sure there's no signs of water damage. If there's signs of water damage, then there's a potential that you have an issue that may or may not need to be addressed. So that's step one, it'd be a visual inspection. Step two, as part of that process, I would have them do what's called an MVOC sample. And not everybody does these things, but you can do a MVOC sample and it'll tell you the types of VOCs that are found. And again, not everybody does these, but it'll give you a clue to determine if there's active mold growing in the home. Again, it's not perfect. None of these tests are perfect. So, make sure you do your research, but it'll tell you, hey, I'm picking up formaldehyde, or hey, I'm picking up this VOC that's typically from an active mold growth situation. And that's a test I would definitely recommend. They also have nowadays, they have mycotoxin testing. And this is kind of new to the industry. I haven't done this before, but I've heard about it, where you can come in and test your home for mycotoxins, similar to an air sample. So it's imperfect, but it'll tell you if there's any mycotoxins floating in the air. If there's mycotoxins floating in the air, guess what? That means there's probably mold somewhere that's producing those mycotoxins. Now, it could be from a dog or a pet or from your clothing, but more likely than not, there's a mold issue in that home. So that's another one I'd recommend if you could do it. They're expensive, but definitely want to do an ERMI. I'd recommend an ERMI or a dust test. The dust kit from Brian Carr, they've got a dust sample kit that you can purchase. That's a good option. I think they even give you the results. If you don't want to spend money on a professional inspector, they can give you results and talk about it over the phone. But I would do that. I'd start with the visual inspection for sure, looking for signs of water damage. If you see those, then you'll want to explore that a little bit further. Excuse me. And you could do air samples. I think that doesn't hurt to do air samples just to see what you capture on a aerosol. But that's completely up to you. I would do that. So those are the tests I would do. The VOC, I'd consider the mycotoxin test. That's hit or miss. If it's worth it, I don't know. But I do the ERMI or the dust test, and then I do some air samples just to get a flavor of what's going on in that environment. It's going to depend on if the home is empty as well, or if it is still occupied and has furniture in it. It'd be a lot easier if it's empty. If it's occupied, then your results could be skewed based on whatever's in that home, whether it be couches or old jackets or things of that nature. The other thing I'd recommend, whether you do it or you have a professional, is that they have some sort of device that tells you the humidity in that home and tells you the temperature. And if the humidity in that home with the air running is above 60%, then that's a clue to you that you might have issues in that home with mold. Anytime humidity gets above 60%, mold can start to grow. Most species can grow above 60%. So it's not perfect, but it's just a clue. If you walk in and your humidity is 70%, something's probably not right in here.
Yeah, you can also do a moisture meter to measure if there's moisture in the walls. that's something your inspector could do, or even you can do, but usually you don't have a huge window to inspect. So you may not always be able to wait for a dust test. So again, let's not over rely on one method, which is kind of what we're trying to teach. Do a visual inspection, do a 5 senses inspection, inspect all the hot areas that mold could exist, check humidity, check for moisture. Know that probably, there's very few homes that will be perfect. Also, just know that. And yes, the belongings inside couldn't be an issue. I just had a client go in the, what do they call it, escrow process, and they couldn't find any water damage. But it turned out the staging furniture was moldy. She found this whole, luckily the owner let her, an IEP recommended she spend the night. Somehow the owner let her do this because the house was unoccupied. And she found this huge spot of mold under a mattress, which is amazing. So, there was a talk was had with the staging company about how they were storing their stuff, but it wasn't actually the house. So things can be a little tricky. I put the name of We Inspect, which is Brian Carr's company. He mentioned you can do a whole training program on how to do this stuff yourself. It's not magic and it's not that inaccessible, right? It's just signs of water damage, places to look, moisture testing. These are things we can learn actually. And if you're going to be buying houses throughout your lifetime, something to learn. I'll also say don't rush into buying a house if you're going through mold. You may want to keep your life a little more temporary for a while. So even Jesse's story, he was very sick. He didn't know he was exposed to mold, accidentally moved into another house with mold. This story is very common, that you accidentally move into mold again. So do you want to be locked down to a house that you have a mortgage on? So check very thoroughly, but maybe being a homeowner is not your moment quite yet. Let your body recover a little bit till you're in a better place. And frankly, you're not always making the best decisions because you're so paranoid and hyper vigilant about mold. So you might just want to wait till you're more settled, you kind of created a new life for yourself before making that big decision. So yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll close it up there. I just am sharing on the banner here, and I'll put it in the chat, our toxic mold trained program that Jesse took. We're so thankful for that. And, you're kind of getting a sense of hopefully real life people who've been affected by mold and kind of want to know more about this industry. I think you're definitely got a sense that Jesse's really able to give back and has some expertise here. So that's our link. And then I'll share his link one more time here, which is No Spores.
And I'll just interject here. If you're on the fence about taking Bridget's class, I would say do it. If you're not a practitioner, I wasn't a practitioner. I'm not a medical person at all. So there was a lot of things that were kind of drinking from the fire hose on learning some medical things, but I learned so much from her class that I need to go back and watch it again, Bridget, to be honest. There's just so many things that you guys taught that were good tips, tricks, hacks on how to help your body to heal. And if you're a practitioner, and if I was a practitioner, I would imagine I could use that to really help my clients and grow a business. So definitely recommend.
Yeah.
It helped me tremendously, helped me learn some things about ways I could help myself and my family. And it was just a wealth of information.
Yeah, we don't hold back. I mean, Mickey and I did look for studies to explain what we were talking about. We really go deep in every class. So, and people have been asking I can't do this one. Can I do the next one? I'll tell you what, I have the attention span of a hummingbird. So I don't know if I'm going to give this course forever. So we're doing it still now live. I think I may do it in the fall, and that may be the last time. So, I would suggest not putting it off forever. You still have the info, if you're I'm not quite ready to start my business, you'll still have all the talks and all the stuff to go back and refer to. So I think getting it now when it's like we're doing it live, like we're all in. And we're adding some things this time based on the last group's feedback. We're adding more case studies, especially because that's what people wanted the most. So we'd love to have you. All right. Well, thanks for everyone for being on and your great questions. And thank you, Jesse, for your time and, showing up for this crazy mold field. We appreciate it.
I'm here to help. Thanks, Bridget. It's good to see you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
If you're in North Carolina or you just need some help with your home questions, we have plenty today. You can go check out Jesse at nospores.com. Thanks, everybody. And this recording will be at the same link here on YouTube if you want to get back to it. All right. Take care.
Thank you.